How's it going, everybody? Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, same here.
I can hear you.
Thank you much.
I'll have you guys know I am missing the first Cowboys game of the season today. Being on here, I'm like, so nobody talk about football.
Well, why would we talk about the Cowboys?
Yeah, woo woo. I'm in my Cowboys gear. My Cowboys nails are going. So this is a big commitment not to be there today.
Unless we have a DVR.
Yeah. My husband's riding his bike to the place everyone's going to watch the game. That'll give you an idea.
Somebody called that a bodega.
I know. I'm actually at Windward Ford right now in an office. Can you imagine? My meeting went too long, so he just set me up in an office.
But you selling cars now?
Yeah, they're my client. I do their digital.
How many cars I bought.
But if you know anyone who's looking for a job, they're paying ridiculous money.
Back end or front end?
Pardon me?
Back end?
I didn't hear you.
Sales or
They need BDC people. They're talking about $4,000 a month plus, you know, a spiff for every appointment you make. Like, it's crazy. Could be 6 figures. And salespeople here, the ones that aren't great are making 6 figures. The ones that are good are making 150.
Wow.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give up real estate.
Yeah. Hello. Could do both. Hey, Dylan.
How's it going?
Good. How's it going, Dale?
All good. Just another Zoom meeting.
I know. I want to meet in person.
Careful what you ask for.
You're right, Kevin. It was a lot the last time flying over. Sometimes every week for weeks on end. So
At least you don't have to test anymore. Well, currently.
Okay, Chair, you can begin. Thanks, Scott. So I hereby call this meeting of the Reapportionment Commission to order. It's 1 o'clock on September 9th, 2021. This meeting is being conducted by video conference. I heard people talking about meeting in person. We'd violate county rules, I think.
Channel holding 8500, call holding 8500,
And then, I'm
Sorry.
not sure I hear, okay, we're good? Okay. Anyway, this meeting is being conducted by video conference and telephone. Want to remind the commissioners, keep your camera on, please, during the duration of the meeting. For clarification, we are using the amended agenda that was issued on September 3rd, 2021. Mr. Secretary, can you please take the roll?
Chair Muguishi,
Present.
Commissioner Chipchase,
Present.
Commissioner Chun,
Here.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Here, present.
Commissioner Nakota. Commissioner Nishimura. Commissioner Nanaka,
Present.
Commissioner Ono,
Here.
Commissioner Rathbun,
Present.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Commissioners, pursuant to the governor's emergency proclamation dated August 5th, 2021, related to the COVID-19 response, is anyone present for you with this meeting? So I'll start by disclosing that, like all previous meetings, Matthew Sasaki, my Director of Government Relations, is sitting in the room with me, taking notes and keeping me out of trouble. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. All right, so pursuant to the governor's emergency proclamation, we will be meeting remotely using interactive conference technology. So this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the Office of Elections website at elections.hawaii.gov shortly after the conclusion of the meeting. As a reminder to the public, your microphone will be muted until you are called upon. So we're now going to move on to public testimony. As technical issues may arise, we will give each testifier a few moments to try and resolve any connection issues. However, if the issues cannot be resolved, we will have to move on to the next testifier. If you would like to testify, please click raise hand under reactions on Zoom. If you are joining us by phone, please press *9. When recognized, please unmute your microphone before speaking. You may also turn on your video at this time. For the record, please state your first and last name and the items you will be testifying on. For those testifiers joining us by phone, we will not have your name and will be identifying you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. To ensure that we will have sufficient time to hear all testimony, like we talked about at the last meeting, each testifier will have 3 minutes to testify. Once your time has expired, you will be asked to conclude your remarks. During public testimony, the commissioners will also be muted, but they may unmute themselves to ask questions. Will the secretary please announce the first testifier?
The first testifier is Bart Dane.
Aloha. Can you hear and see me? Yeah, my name is, as you heard, my name is Bart Dame. I am submitting testimony which is somewhat similar to what was seen before, relying largely upon charts to present the evidence in what I think is an orderly, easy to understand fashion. So chart number 1, I think you're familiar with, which shows how the proposed extraction this time is so much smaller than it was 10 years ago. It's only 67.37% on the military. So I want an explanation of that. So far, there's not been one forthcoming. My second chart shows that the military population, according to DBED's figures, and I think they're credible. If people don't think they're credible, they should state why they don't think they're credible. But the DBED population shows that the military population has only declined by 5%, which is far different from the 32.5%, which seems to underlie the statistics being provided by the staff. Let me skip over the third and fourth charts. I want to go to the fifth chart. That's something new. What I've done there in chart number 5 is I present the military population as calculated and reported by DBED for 1980, April 1st, 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, 2020. I show how many military dependents they had, and I show the total military population. I'm the one who added the military population, so that's my data. Second, I show the number that was extracted by the Reapportionment Commission for the succeeding reapportionment. And I show the percentage of that extraction relative to the estimated population by DBED. It shows that in 1991, 99% of the 114,000 estimated by DBED were extracted and not as non-resident persons by the commission of 1991. By 2000, relying upon the oral presentation by Dave Rosenbrock at the last meeting, I'm estimating the number extracted as 74 to 75 that year. 91.95% of the identified military population were extracted. There were last time 90.16% were extracted. What is being proposed this time is only 64% of the military population as reported by DBED. That is an outlier. It is a sharp break from past precedent. I think you have to re-examine the methodology. And I think if you turn to Solomon, I know you said that everyone knew Solomon. I don't think that's accurate because the presentation by Royce last time showed that they were not following Solomon. They were looking for census block specific data. And then from there, they were trying to add it up to get to the county level, as opposed to the top-down extraction that was being advocated by Malama Solomon in her lawsuit. So I think if you look at it and look at the reality and you see that the data only accounts for about 2/3 of the military that is known by credible sources to be here, you have to see how do you supplement the DoD provided data. And I think you should turn to DBED and you should use methodology similar to what was used in the past to calculate how many of those military military personnel and their dependents are likely non-permanent residents and deduct them. You can easily get the number of how many are stationed on neighbor islands and the rest come from Oahu. I think you're overlooking 25 to 30,000 military. And if you approve a plan that overlooks that many obviously present non-permanent residents, then I think you're in danger of following in the footpaths of the Solomon decision and not complying and facing a lawsuit. So I am available to answer questions. I know I presented a lot of information here. I think it's credible information. And if I made mistakes of math or logic, I would appreciate somebody taking the time to do it. But I think this is important enough that we should be dealing with this. It's the elephant in the room.
Any questions from the commissioners for Bart and his testimony?
How would you propose if we take the entire DBID number out? How do you propose where we take them out from?
Hey, Commissioner, I miss talking to you. 10 years ago, we talked a lot. This time, not so much.
I'm available.
As you are aware, in Solomon, I think chastise is a fair word. They chastise the commission for confusing step 1 methodology and step 2 methodology. And we had this discussion 10 years ago. That sometimes you have data that is location specific enough that you know what county the non-permanent resident resides in, but you can't place them with a street address or a zip code +4, right? So we have the same dilemma this time. So I suggest that in addition to the approach that Dave and Royce are doing, trying to build the data up from the bottom, you do look at extracting from the top. So you go and you look at the overall military population for the state. You can calculate, I think relatively easy, how many military are stationed on the 3 other counties, deduct them from the total, and then use the same standard that was used before based on previous polling and surveys, that 99% of the military who are stationed here have legally declared themselves to be residents of other states, right? That has been the past understanding of past commissions. And if you guys want to deviate from that, someone should explain why. And on dependence,
but the question is where do they specifically come out from? Like, okay, we take them off the top, off the county. but that's not representative of where they actually are on the ground, or they just
Yeah.
don't, we just pretend like they don't exist.
No. I'm saying that out of fairness, the neighbor islands, and following what Solomon actually said, for the first step, if you know what county they're in, then they are location specific enough that you are obligated to extract them from the permanent resident population for apportionment between the 4 basic island units.
Got it.
But then you,
That makes
but then
sense.
you
But then
have a problem.
how do we draw lines based on a number that comes off the top and not taken specifically out of a geographic position on the map?
I am very sympathetic to that. I'm also sympathetic to the creative ways in which the technical guys have been trying to wrestle with that problem. That is a separate problem, a separate activity. What I'm trying to do right now is get the first step correct. And I think that I have a strong legal basis and evidentiary basis for what I'm saying. So the take it off the top approach will satisfy the first step. It postpones the problem and kicks it down, especially to Oahu people, right? The redrawing of maps on Oahu. And I don't envy you the complexity of that, but it's a mistake to say we have to have census block specific data, right? For the second step, and only by assembling that and adding that all up can we come up with the permanent resident population for the county as a whole. That's back-ass words, to use a technical term. And I think that the commission was chastised for exactly that approach 10 years ago. Do I make sense?
I understand where you're coming from. It doesn't solve the problem of, well, I
It
guess
solves the
and-
problem for
and-
step one.
And the second question, from that would be, so you don't believe numbers provided by the military directly on who claims Hawaii not to be their permanent residence is credible, right? Is that what
No,
you're saying?
I know I'm not saying that at all.
Okay.
I'm saying for whatever reasons, first, I do not know what question was asked of the military, right? And everything went through, probably was a Senator Schott's office to try to get the information. So I don't know what they were asked. My sense from listening to the presentation last time is they were asked for lists, for records of those that were present in the state on April 1st, that have filed as residents, declared their residents of another state, and for whom there is a zip code or a zip code +4 code, right? I do not know if they were asked, can you provide us the numbers for how many people who meet those first 2 criteria who reside in each county? And we were told by David that the military doesn't like to tell us where their people are. That was said a couple of times.
The zip code tells us that. So if that information is provided, then we can derive what county they're in.
Yes, but if you asked what county they were in, the military may be more amenable if they're resistant to tell you where their people are. If you ask for a bulk request of how many do you have on Oahu, how many in Maui County, how many Big Island and Kauai, they may be more forthcoming. I'm not saying that they are trying to deceive us. I'm saying that it's very clear from looking at the data that's been assembled by the staff, working as hard as they can. They're only accounting for about 2/3 of the military that's there. I don't buy the notion that the military presence has declined by 1/3 since 10 years. And the DBED data does not support that at all. And DBED data, I think, is pretty credible, probably within a percentage or two. And finally, when the records do come out, I think we're going to see that.
All right, thanks.
Sure. Good to talk to you again.
Any other question? We're gonna, for the commissioners' edification, we're gonna have a staff presentation when we discuss this agenda item that goes through all of those, what questions were asked of the military, what their response are. We went back afterward because this has come up a lot, and we asked them for the validity and to reaffirm the validity of their numbers. And we also asked DBED for potential explanations for the discrepancy. And the staff will provide all of that during that agenda item.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, Mr. Secretary, next testifier.
Next testifier is Corey Hardin. Okay, moving on. The
Wait,
next testifier.
Hello, this is Corey.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hear me? Sorry, technical difficulties. Hello, Corey Harden from Hilo. First, want to thank you folks for your service on the commission. A couple points summarizing my written testimony. One is precedent. You're setting a precedent. It's not just about 2021. You're setting a precedent for future reapportionments as far as level of transparency and public involvement and methods of determining extraction. Also, transparency. I don't understand how the technical committee, as a permitted interaction group, I don't understand how it's going to get its work done without discussions and deliberations that would violate the Sunshine Law. The Sunshine Law, as you know, says discussions, deliberations, decisions, and action should be conducted as openly as possible. Provisions providing for exceptions shall be strictly construed against closed meetings. I understand from Civil Beat that the technical committee, they say, will bear the brunt of the commission's work in drawing political lines. The permitted interaction is being used to expedite your folks' work. But if you end up with a court challenge, that's not going to be expeditious. And that might influence the outcome of elections by leaving less time to campaign. And you're well aware of the past challenges. Also, regarding public involvement, I was just at the Hawaii County Redistricting meeting, and they are taking brief questions from the public periodically during the meeting and taking public testimony after certain agenda items. I think the exchange just a minute ago with Bart Dame was very helpful, and so I hope you'll consider that. Regarding military, I wonder if National Guard, Reserves, and Coast Guard are considered part of the military for census purposes and also for commission reports. I share Bart Dame's concerns about the DBED numbers and the military numbers, and I'm glad to hear you be delving into that. I support incarcerated people being counted at their home address. And regarding public involvement, I hope you folks will think about how to make some information available to people who do not have computers, which is a lot of people on Hawaii Island and more remote areas. Please consider having board packets available 24 hours before written testimony is due, so people can prepare some meaningful testimony. And last, if you can set some meeting dates and times in advance, then people can plan so they can testify. Again, thank you for your work.
Aloha, Corey. Any questions for Corey? Okay, Scott, next.
The next testifier is Shannon Matson.
Hi, aloha, commissioners. I'm having some technical difficulties as well, so please interrupt me if you can't hear me. I wanted to kind of second what Corey just said. I was just at the county redistricting commission meeting and really appreciated the way that meeting was conducted, that we were able to ask questions of the presenters after certain agenda items, and that also we were allowed to either choose to testify at the beginning of the meeting or reserve our testimony for later in the meeting, which I think would have possibly addressed some of the issues that previous testifier Bart Dean just brought up, that potentially those questions that he was asking might have been answered later in your agenda. And I know we're on limited time here, so that would be really helpful, I think, for us to be able to hear and process this large volume of information to be able to provide testimony later. So I would really ask the commission to consider making that change We know that transparency is so important so that we don't have to go back to the court system after your decisions and deliberations and time has been spent on this really important topic that will influence our politics for the next decade. So in the light of transparency, we, the public, deserve the opportunity to ask as many questions as we might need to for clarity. So that's the bulk of my testimony. I am very interested in permanent residence and how that will be affected. And I'm also very interested in the other item that Corey just mentioned, that incarcerated individuals are counted at their home residence. I think that is important as well. And again, thank you for all the work you're doing. Aloha.
Mahalo. Any questions? I'll just make a comment that, and I'm not sure if this is going to be in David Rosenbrock's presentation later. So I'll just say it now because the last two testifiers back to back asked about the prisoners. So David did contact the Department of Public Safety about the concerns of where we count incarcerated inmates. And what he was told was at the time of the census, the correctional facility fills out a spreadsheet provided by the Census Bureau with the inmate's home address. So, and then that's given to the Census Bureau via a secure link so that the inmate is counted in the facility in aggregate. And then when it's broken down by census block, they're moved to their address that they provided. David, I don't know if you're on and if I said that right. If that's correct, if you can acknowledge, that'd be great.
Yes, Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. I know you were probably going to include that in your report, but I figured since two people in a row had asked that question, I would just thank you for your investigation of that with the right agency and getting the answer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, Scott, next person.
The next testifier is Kainoa Kamehameha Regal.
Aloha, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome, mahalo. Aloha, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, mahalo nui loa for this opportunity to testify. My name is Kainoa Kamehameha Regal, and I'm offering testimony on behalf of Common Cause Hawaii. I'd like to begin by commending the commission staff for developing and presenting a proposed working timeline and scheduled meetings at the August 26th meeting. But consistent with our testimony from that meeting, upon the commission's approval, we asked that the commission immediately put up the schedule of meetings on its website so that the public can have greater access and participation in commission meetings. We also request the opportunity to testify after each agenda item. We believe that limiting the public testimony at the beginning of the meeting decreases the impact and meaningfulness behind the testimony submitted. We also reiterate, actually, yes, we don't have to reiterate this point because these folks did some great research and let us know that incarcerated folks are actually counted from their home addresses, so that's wonderful. Mahalo nui for that clarification. In terms of item 6, the discussion and action regarding the use of Canoe district, Common Cause encourages the commission to adhere to the Constitution, specifically Article 6, Section 6, and distinctly the 2 points that no district shall extend beyond the boundaries of any basic island unit, as well as the second point, except in the case of districts encompassing more than one island, district shall be considered. Lastly, with regard to item 8, discussion and action regarding the commission's interaction with the advisory council, we've been very persistent as we restate our strong concerns about improperly formed permitted interaction groups. So we just call upon the commission, should it decide that a permitted interaction group is the way in which they'd like to address this issue, that we just take the time to properly and legally form. Other than that, commissioners, that's all I have to offer. Mahalo for the
Mahalo for your testimony. Any questions for Kanoa? Just a couple of comments. First, the Canoe District issue, it's an agenda item today. We'll be discussing that in open session. So thank you for bringing that up. Second, since you're the second person who brought up this, the ability to testify after each agenda item, I'm going to just take the heat for this as chair and just say, personally, I don't think I can run a effective meeting and get everything done if we allow that to happen. So I'm just going to say, I just don't feel like I can do that and do justice to commission business. So I appreciate the need for public testimony, and we're going to give all the time we need at the beginning of every meeting to make sure public can express their concerns. We're going to take all written testimony, and you have my word that we're going to consider it all. As you can see today, all the things that were brought up before, we had the staff look into so we can address at this meeting. But the ability to actually stop at each agenda item and allow public testimony is going to preclude us from getting work done in a timely fashion. So I'm sorry, but I'm not going to, as chair, I'm not going to let that happen. Any other questions for Kanoa? Mahalo. Next testifier, Scott.
Chair, before we continue, I would like to acknowledge Commissioner Nakota as present. The next testifier is Becky Gardner.
Aloha, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Hi again, everybody. It's starting to feel like a family reunion. So you've heard me before, but just for the public, my name is Becky Gardner. I'm owner founder of Policy Matters LLC, and I'm here today to focus my testimony on agenda item number 5, and specifically the relevance of the Solomon decision. And if I may ask your indulgence to allow me to share some links in the chat, I think it's disabled for me. But I have some, I did write testimony, but I only submitted it a couple hours ago, so I don't think it's before you. So I have a link to my testimony and some other links that may be helpful if that's okay. Until I see that ability, I'm just going to continue. The key points of Solomon, I think, are: 1, that reapportionment is a 2-part, 2-step process. So that is key, that is foundational. Another key point that Solomon elucidates is that census block specific information was not needed for the step 1, the apportionment among the basic island units. And if I can share my testimony in the chat, I wanted to draw your attention to specific language from this Solomon decision. And, we see consistently through the discussion that they're explaining 2-step process. First, you have to do the among, then you do the within. And I think this is reflected in just the process of drafting our Constitution. We have Article 4, Article 5, Article 4, and then Section 4 is about apportioning among the basic island units. So that's key. And then Section 5, I think, is about minimum representation of the basic island unit. So that's a whole different idea. And then Article 4, Section 6 is about apportioning within. So that there are separate processes outlined in the Constitution and carefully drafted in this way, using words like among for step 4, Section 4, and within for 2 sections later, I think is very significant. And other things that Solomon mentions is that this is a process. It's very key. It's a process, and there are 2 very different activities. I I think what's particularly significant from Solomon is saying that the 2011 commission focused solely on identification of non-permanent residents for step 2 and used the results for step 2 to identify the non-permanent resident population for step 1. And they clearly say that that was in error. And so I just want to, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I just want to like red flag, like, please don't do this because it's going to mess things up, I think, with the timing and, and just the integrity of our Constitution. And I know I'm out of time, but I think, it's important to not allow our quest for the perfect to ruin, what will be good. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. I have some more I want to say, and I do want to share some links if I can. So I will make myself available for questions, but I do have to pick up my daughter. So I hope that the timing works out, that I'm able to chat with you if anyone does have questions for me. But with that, I'll conclude. And sorry for going over.
Thank you, Becky. Any questions for Becky?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask kind of the similar question. Thanks, Becky, for that. So are you contending that the data doesn't have to be related between what we use to apportion among and then within?
I wouldn't say it doesn't have to be related because it is related. I mean, just as a function, it's coming from the census. But what I'm saying is we can't let our fixation on having a really good step 2 districting process allow us to shirk our responsibility for doing what is required, constitutionally mandated for step 1. And Solomon really is interesting because they harp on this idea. They even extract from the lawsuit from Matsukawa and their argumentation that the commission bemoaned the difficulty of step 2 and sort of used it as a reason to shirk their responsibilities. And I don't want to see that happen again. And so I want to like validate, yeah, you guys have, especially you're on the technical committee, you're going to have a hard time doing the districting. I do not envy you at all. This is a very difficult process, but just because district 2 is going to be difficult or step 2 is going to be difficult because you don't have great census block data doesn't mean you shouldn't do what you can do quite cleanly and clearly in step 1, which is take off the top and apportion among the basic island units. And you can't get to step 2 until you finish step 1. And Solomon, this isn't me saying this. This is
so
Solomon
what data set do you suggest we use for step 1?
Well, that seems to be a question that you guys need to decide as a commission. Like, are you going to use the data that you got from the military, which is 67% of what DBED does? Are you going to go with DBED's data? Are you going to go with what the military declares their home state? I know that the 2011 commission, just came up with like 3 different options for that. So I imagine that's something up for you to decide, but I will, echo my support for what Bart Dame was suggesting earlier, is that we need to really do some, and I say we, like we as the public, right? We need to do our due diligence to reconcile all these different data sources and come up with what is our best efforts to, a true extraction, and not just taking, okay, well, the military said this, we're going to turn a blind eye to all this other information from the census, from DBED, from declarations, because this is a nice clean data and we got it from the military force's mouth, but it's very different. So I think this difference is important for you guys to grapple with and come to some sort of decision and put the reasons for your decision in the record. So the public like me can say, okay, that's fair. I understand why and I know you need to look at the totality and everything, but just, follow the Constitution. It's like, following instructions, step 4, do this, or, Article 4, Section 4, do this. And then 5, make sure there's minimum representation. And then 6, then we go to each island and we draw the lines, and like, that's going to be hard because you don't know exactly where you live, but you already did the off the top. So you don't have to worry about a challenge on that level. So I can't tell you like oh, I'm not a statistician, I can't say, oh, this is the best data and this is what, but I think what you need to do is just reconcile all, because as far as I can see, the Constitution, there's no mandate in statute that says you have to use what the military gives you, or you have to use what DBED gives you. So that's up to you guys to decide and figure out. But as a member of the public, I guess if I was pressed to tell you, I would say, let's go with DBED's data because it seems to be consistent, with the trends, the population trends, and the data we just got for the census specific thing is a little bit aberrant. It's a little bit out there. So I wouldn't hang your hat on that at risk of having a legal challenge in the future. Sorry, did I answer your question?
It's I want to go back to everybody who's got this concern. Like, I mean, it's pointing out a problem with no suggestion on a solution. So it's not helpful.
Yeah. And that's why I say, like, I don't envy you guys. You guys are in a tough position to garbage in, garbage out, right? What are you going to do? You're just going to produce garbage, I guess, is the sense. But that's step two. So we don't want to contaminate clean step one.
No matter what, the entire process is arbitrary. It just depends on what arbitrary number we want to use, because there's no evidence that the census didn't count these people to begin with. So we're talking about taking an arbitrary number of people out of the census number, which we don't even know if the census counted them in the first place because we can't verify that to begin with, right? So no matter what the number is, it's arbitrary.
I respectfully disagree that it's arbitrary. So I would go with, from the census data and, and also declaration.
But so does DBED, if you're suggesting we use the DBED data, does DBED verify that those 100,000 military that they count are not counted in this, or that the counts they are included in the census count?
Oh, I haven't gone that far.
We don't know that. I mean, we don't know what that number is arbitrary in relation to the census.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not, saying that your job is easy. I think, what I'm saying is that the Constitution mandates you follow a particular process. And if you feel like this process isn't working, just like in 2011, then perhaps there should be some movement legislatively to change our Constitution so it's going to work with our modern day data. But until that change has happened, until it's the will of the public, and our representatives to make that change, we're stuck with this imperfect system. And if we stray from this, and whether it's imperfect or imperfect, that's up for legislators to decide. But you guys are mandated to follow this sort of junk process as it seems to be, viewed by some. You're mandated to follow it, unfortunately, if it's going to make step two really hard. But the result is really important, right? I mean, are we going to deny any island representation that our framers said we need to ensure happens? So the stakes are high. And that's what step one is about. Step two, the districting, yeah, the stakes are high there, but representation from a neighbor island, according to the framers, is more important because they put that step, they drafted it in the Constitution higher up. Do this first. This is a priority. Then next priority is make sure that there's minimal, and I think that's significant too, in Section 5, make sure there's minimal representation from the, and I'm here as an Oahu resident. So like this goes against, and I even ran for office, right? I will lose a House seat if you do that full extraction. So it's against my interest. So I'm here saying, do something that's against my interest because I want to make sure you follow the Constitution. So, just to put that into perspective. Any
other questions for Becky?
I don't know if I'm unmuted yet. Mark, are they, Royce and David, in their presentation today, are they going to answer a lot of this? Because I feel like, no offense, I love that everyone's volunteering information, but I feel like they're saying a lot the same thing under the impression that we're not doing these things. Or I honestly, I don't know if there have been technical meetings or not, but at the end of the day, I feel like, are we going to answer this? It's the same thing almost every week. So are David and Royce going to share information on exactly how they're extrapolating data and what they're doing today?
Hey, Robin, yeah. So the answer is yes. And it's what it is. It's the same thing from last week. And so they needed the intervening week to find the answers, right? So I think they did a great job in my mind of finding the answers about why is there a discrepancy between DBED numbers and the military numbers? Which numbers are the ones we are more likely to believe? What questions were actually asked to the military in getting the numbers that they got? All of those things will be presented in their report. So I just want to make it clear that we take the Solomon decision very seriously as a commission. And that's why we're, from the time this was raised at the last meeting, we asked the staff to do research and find out answers, which are going to be presented today. That's number one. And number two, we go into executive session a lot, as you know, and we've been criticized for that. Like, why are you going into executive session again? Well, the answer is exactly, Becky, what you're talking about is that we take our commitment to the Solomon decision seriously, and we need to confer with our attorney. So whenever we're in executive session, we're conferring with the Attorney General's office. I anticipate we'll be going in again. I mean, I can't decide that for myself. We'll have to have a motion and everything, but we were expecting legal opinions on some of these issues that you're bringing up. So I'm just guessing we're going to end up there again. But that's the reason, is that we do take it seriously.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Any other questions for Becky? Okay, if not, Scott, next testifier.
The next testifier is Senator Laura Ocasio.
Aloha, thank you for being here, Chair Mugiishi and members of the commission. I really appreciate all of these explanations. It's very helpful and grateful that you folks are doing the work that you're doing. I recognize it's not easy. And so just to say that I actually, speaking on behalf of constituents across all of the islands, not only about Hawaii Island, but particularly representing Hawaii Island. So it's very important to us as well to have that clarity and transparency about how the numbers are chosen and why, what justifies that. So like I had asked during last reapportionment commission meeting, and with all due respect, we thought that perhaps the questions would be answered in the presentation. But like I said in my testimony, these concerns were not really addressed. And in fact, it was concerning that when staff was asked about the data being extracted from the military, the direct quote is, we've never done that except for when the Supreme Court told us to go back and make sure we had the numbers and locations for all the records that we needed to take out. And so then at that point, the numbers changed and were more reflective of DBED's data. So this leaves me to ask again, for the sake of transparency and accuracy, how the commission can justify using that military non-permanent resident numbers for extraction that are nearly 1/3 lower than the DBED data. And I want to refer to the first testifier's chart 5, because that was very clearly laid out. That was Bart Dame who laid out how this particular data that's currently being provided by the military is an outlier in the past years. And so just more clarification on that, and as you know, and that as an authoritative body, that DBED's data has credence, and to consider that as well, and just explain that where the discrepancy is from that 5. DBED has a 5% decline versus a 30-some% decline in data. And then, just not to reiterate too much what was said before, but all the previous testimony is very relevant in terms of learning the lessons from Solomon. And I know you folks are versed in it and have, studied it through and through, but it just seems like that there needs to be more explanation and closer consideration of those details when it comes to the two-step process and the apportionment, the extraction on the apportionment side being very different from that census block data in step 2. So thank you very much for your time, and I'm available if you do have questions. Otherwise, I'll be standing by for the presentation.
Mahalo, Senator. Any questions for the senator?
I think it's just important to note that the data that the military provided was the exact same process that they did in 2011, correct? Royce or David? I think that was talked about last meeting. All right, we'll let them confirm that, but my understanding is that there is no deviation from the way that the data was collected, so it's not we're not going through a different process, right, David?
We're not using a different process that we didn't use in 2001 and 2011. Again, I'd like to remind everybody that in 2011, there were 3 options given to the commission for extraction. And one of those was a very small extraction amount that was confined to barracks and facilities inside the military base. This was a very low number, but we had absolute accuracy on where we were pulling or making the subtraction of the population from. The second option was a little bit greater. We used the barracks information, and then we also took the information adjacent to the military installation. So basically the housing there. And that extraction was a little bit greater. And then we used the extraction that the military gave us. And that extraction was at the time about the same as this one. However, the commission chose to use one where they felt like they had a stronger identification of where those non-permanent residents were at. That's why they made the decision. They didn't make the decision based on the data, only on the locating the data. When we went back and recalculated, because we had to go back to the military and ask them that we needed location data that was better than the data they gave us initially. And when they did that, then we rushed into making the extraction. Now, I won't say this as a fact, but it could be that Royce and I and the AG at the time might have double counted some of those people that might have been extracted. I'm just saying that if you look at the numbers in 2001, the actual numbers, not DBET's numbers, the actual numbers in 2001, and now it seems like 2010 is the outlier. But we can't go back and cook old rice, right? So the method that we've been doing has not been challenged. What's been challenged is the decision on that. That's all I have.
Thanks, that's helpful, David. Okay, Senator, just one other question when it comes to non-permanent residents. Like we're fixated on the military, but we spend like very little time on students or say second homeowners, vacationers, snowbirds that are here non-permanently. Like, should we put more energy into that?
Well,
that's for the senator, Dave, not for you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I think thank you. I would also like to hear what staff has to say, Mr. Rosenbach. But at the same time, to answer your question, I think absolutely, and that would be doing the due diligence. I think the reason why the majority of the focus for this purpose is military is because the number is so large, and at least for Hawaii Island, in comparison to the other islands, we have very little extraction, and compared to the large numbers that are on Oahu. I think
like I would say,
yes,
I would say specifically for your community that the number of students being extracted from the census count is probably less than half of what it actually is if we looked at UH Hilo closer. So the extraction would be greater.
Exactly. And then in that case, then the due diligence of the commission is to get the most accurate numbers. And again, this comes from Solomon in doing the due diligence to get the most exacting numbers. For me, I don't have an agenda of how it comes out. I would like transparency, explanation, and proper process and following the Constitution and the mandate from Solomon.
Do you have a suggestion on process? That's what I'm gonna always go back to because I'd like to apply the same process to everybody.
Again, it was the same. That was rather than reiterating what Bart Dame said in terms of the two-step process, and also Becky Gardner illustrated it very well. Is taking out from the counties in the first process, and then again, like she said, it's a difficult process, and they agonized over it last time, and so to apply those same methodologies. But you know the details a lot more than I do when it comes to those kind of nuances. So I mean,
I know that
right?
I know there's a lack of details. That's the issue. I'm looking for details.
Right. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And that's perfect, because that's why I'm here, is just to really stress the need for due diligence on those numbers. And I think the reason why my focus is on military is because that number between DBED and the number that you folks have is, or that was presented last session is quite a difference. And to have, and it may be legitimate, but the explanation is not there. And so the concerns in the community are still very prevalent. And also we have no time, right? So of course, because of the lateness of the census data and the upcoming election, it's really about trying to avoid more litigation and learning from Solomon, which is what I stated in the testimony, is learning from Solomon and taking those examples and doing the diligence to find that data. But thank you.
Right on. Thank you, Senator.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm not going to try and steal staff's thunder when they do this, but in terms of just the distinction between the DBED numbers and the military numbers, there's actually a lot in there, but I'll just steal their thunder a little bit and share one of the more easy to understand ones. Is the DBED numbers counts all military. So that includes people who would consider Hawaii their home. And when you put that in the number along with their spouse and their dependents, it can actually be a relatively large number. So that's part of the reason for the discrepancy. And David's going to go over that and other reasons why there's a discrepancy between the DBED number and the non-permanent military that the military actually gives us as the employer of the people that keeps all that information. So anyway, we'll anxiously await the story there. Any other questions for the senator? Scott, otherwise, next testifier.
The next testifier is Senator De La Cruz.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to pose a couple questions. When the commission gets the list of, or the number from the universities of out-of-state residents and the number from the military, is there any verification if those who are counted in that number even took the census? And if they did take the census, if they already stated that they were from another state? Because if they didn't take the census or they claimed another state for their home residency, and you take the number provided, then that means we're over extracted. So I'm not sure if there's any verification on looking at that number to ensure that who actually took the census and what they said when they turned the census in. If the staff has any kind of insight to that.
Well, you know, looking at this, we did have to go and contact the Census Bureau, specifically the redistricting folks that handle that. And we asked them if there was any way to cross-reference any of the information that the military gave us with information that the census had. And basically we were told, I mean, there was a lot more stuff, but basically we were told that the census information for redistricting is closed for 72 years after the census is taken. The data that we get for redistricting is just geography, which is census blocks, and it's counts. And the counts are assigned to each census block by using a shapefile and a spreadsheet, right? And so the software matches that up so that we know, but there is no way, there's no question on the census form that says, are you, the place that you're living at now, your domicile, do you live in another state? There's no question on the census that asks that. There's no ability on the census to say, I live in another state, I don't live here, right? I'm stationed here. The only folks that applies to are folks that are on Navy ships. And on the Navy ship, I know I was based in San Diego, and I had Nevada as my state of residence because I didn't have to pay taxes. But I lived in San Diego. So again, there's no way to cross-reference between the census data, DBET data, or DOD data. And there's no way to know if the people in the housing units that the census looked at, because most of it's self-affirming. And then when the census guys did go out walking around because they didn't get a response from somebody, why they can only stand at the front door and say, you know, are you here? How many people sleep here? And you can't really argue with them if they say 5 or 3 or whatever. So we used the information that allowed us to have the most accurate answer that we could have. And that's, if I answered the question.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I think my interpretation is the simple answer is there's no way to know, right? Whether or not there's no way to know if somebody that's reported by DBED, the military, anybody that's in the military was counted or not counted by the census year.
That's correct.
So there is the possibility of over extracting then, because you're getting these numbers from the university and the military, but you're not even sure if they were counted in the census. They may not have taken the census at all.
Yes, that's possible, but we don't know either or. They were in Hawaii at the time that the census was counted. That was one of the requirements we asked universities for. So if they were here and they paid out-of-state tuition or had a permanent address somewhere else, then we had to assume that they took the census.
Okay, so you guys are just assuming that the numbers that you are getting from the military and the universities, that they took the census, and if they took the census, they said that they wrote Hawaii as their permanent address. You're just assuming that.
No. We're not assuming that. When they come and take the census says you're in Hawaii. It gets you down to a physical location.
No, but you have to fill out your own address. So when I got my census form, I have to write my own address.
But didn't they mail it to you?
Yeah.
Then they had your address.
But you don't have to if you can fill out, oh, I'm not from here, or you can fill out I'm from Oklahoma, or if
No, you can't.
online? Because most people this past time took it online.
Yeah, but there's no checkbox on the census form that says you have another state as your residence. There is no question like
No,
that
so-
on the census.
So
form.
when Senator, because we helped write the bill to help clarify some of this. And when Senator Moriwaki had contacted the Census Bureau, they actually said that it was self-correcting. So if people went online or if they filled out a census form and they wrote Oklahoma, they're not included in Hawaii's number.
Well, she was given incorrect information. I sent that exchange that she had with that census worker to the director of redistricting for the Senate or for the census. And he wrote me back that the only self-correcting that occurs is if you're on a Navy ship. People get counted where they lay their head. That's their domicile. That's their what the census
And that's
considers.
and that's provided that they took the census.
Well, yes.
So if they didn't take the census, then what?
Well, we wouldn't know that.
So that means that number could be inflated.
Yes. It could be
Okay.
inflated or deflated. There's no way of knowing.
So you don't, the military doesn't even ask then, did you do this at all? They just give you a list of a number of people.
Well, I mean, I have, about a 5-minute presentation on that. Right?
Okay, I can wait for the presentation.
Okay. We good?
Thank you. Any further questions for Senator Del Cruz? And I think the crux of what Senator De La Cruz is asking us is something that the Office of Elections asked for an opinion from the AG. So if the commissioners are want to hear that opinion, we can go into executive session at the right moment when that's the agenda item. So Scott, next testifier.
I don't see any testifiers, but Commissioner Kennedy has her hand raised. Oh, and before we continue, I would like to acknowledge that Commissioner Nishimura has joined the meeting.
Robin?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, I mean, I feel like all of this testimony, I almost feel like we should do the presentations and then let them ask their questions at the end, not necessarily changing how we do things, just letting them not necessarily have to present their concerns, but answer any question. Like when I just heard David say that they're basically counted based on where they lay their head, then why don't we just leave the military in? Because if they sleep here and they're living here, then they live here. Like regardless of where they are, I mean, they're using our schools or using our roads, our beaches, everything. So I mean, is it already a done deal that they're not we can't keep them? We definitely have to extrapolate them.
Well, I mean, that's what the Supreme Court, that's what the Supreme Court said in 2011. That you
but
have
I
to
thought we weren't bound by that. I didn't think that we were, I mean, we're supposed to make best efforts, but.
No, I think we're definitely, I mean, this is something we can talk with our attorney, with the attorney, but I'm pretty certain we are bound by the ruling of the Supreme Court. It's a constitutional ruling, right? That in order to follow the Hawaii State Constitution, you must extract non-permanent residents in that two-step process.
But I feel like we're not actually proving that they're non-permanent residents. There's no proof that they aren't claiming Hawaii as their residence.
Well, and that's why we have to use best efforts, right? So the question is the best effort asking the military, their employer, tell us the people that you employ who say they live somewhere else but are working in Hawaii? Is it DBED and their numbers, or is it someone, or what is it? And that's what the staff report is going to provide us, is how each of them come to their numbers. So we as a commission decide which one is the most credible source for who's actually a non-permanent resident.
Okay, so no matter what, we're taking them out.
We have to take out something. We have to take out everybody that we deem as a non-permanent resident.
Okay. Okay.
I think Charlotte has her hand up too.
I do. I actually kind of agree with Robin. I'm thinking the intent of Act 14 was just to use census numbers. And the fact that we go in and kind of extract, and I don't understand that. I mean, we can just go with what they give us. Isn't that how it should be?
That's the opinion we asked the Attorney General. So if we get to that agenda item and we can, if the rest of the commission wants to hear it, we can go into executive session and hear the opinion.
Okay.
I make a motion to do that. Do we need to make a motion?
Well, when we get to that agenda item, we can.
Well, I mean, to move into executive session. Okay.
Yeah, let's go. We got minutes to approve and other things like that first, so. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, we'll move on if there are no further testifiers. Okay, so agenda item 4, approval of the minutes from the meeting of August 26, 2021. So in your meeting packet, there were minutes for the August 26th meeting. Any discussions from the commissioners?
I make a motion to approve.
Second.
I second.
So I have a motion by Commissioner Kennedy and a second by Commissioner Nonaka.
Okay, any further discussion? Secretary, please take a vote.
Commissioner Chipchase.
Aye.
Commissioner Chun.
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota.
Aye.
Commissioner Nishimura.
Aye.
Commissioner Nonaka.
Aye.
Commissioner Ono.
Aye.
Commissioner Rathbun.
Aye.
Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item 5, discussion and action to establish the permanent resident population base. This is the topic we've been discussing a lot during the testifying thing. The commission is expecting legal advice, as I mentioned, from the Department of the Attorney General regarding the establishment of the permanent resident population base. Because this advice may inform the commission's decision and because the members may have further questions from our counsel, the commission may want to consult with the commission's counsel before we proceed with any action on this agenda item. If that's the case, is there a motion for the commission to convene into an executive session regarding agenda item 5 to establish the permanent resident population base pursuant to HRS 92-5A4 to consult with the board's attorney on questions and issues pertaining to the board's powers, duties, privileges, immunities, and liabilities?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Commissioner Rathbun, seconded by Commissioner Nakota.
Okay, any discussion? All right, Secretary, please take a vote.
Commissioner Chipchase.
Aye.
Commissioner Chun.
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota.
Aye.
Commissioner Nishimura.
Aye.
Commissioner Nonaka.
Aye.
Commissioner Ono.
Aye.
Commissioner Rathbun.
He's on mute.
Commissioner Rathbun, you're on mute. Chair Muguishi.
Aye.
Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Waiting on Commissioner Kennedy.
Mr. Secretary, if you can let me know when you see everybody back.
We can't start the video because the host made it so we can't. I don't know what that means. Because the host has disabled it.
We're all back.
There we go.
Let me know when you can see everybody.
Everybody's back.
Oh, they're all back? Everybody's video is on?
Commissioner Kennedy,
I'm here.
your video.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Mahalo, everybody, public, we're back and we thank you for your patience. A lot of complicated legal issues to discuss through, especially if we're going to be compliant with all of the precedents and laws and constitution that people have testified that we need to take very seriously. So I do want to say that we conferred with our attorney, the Attorney General, and we are confident that we are following both the Solomon decision and Act 14 in our processes. But we do want to be diligent about explaining to the public what these processes are and how we are going to come to our conclusions about which numbers we actually use. So to start with that, I'm going to have the staff talk about how they obtain these numbers. And so I'm going to turn over to David for that. David Rosenbrock.
Thank you, Chair. I thought I might go back just a little bit and talk about step 1 and step 2, because it was pretty important for us to adhere to that. And section 4 says the commission shall allocate the total number of members of each house of the state legislature being reapportioned among the 4 basic island units, namely the island of Hawaii, the islands of Maui, Lanai, and Molokai, Olave, the island of Oahu, and all islands not specifically enumerated, and for the islands of Kauai and Ni'ihau, using the total number of permanent residents in each basic island and computed by the method known as the method of equal proportions. And then redistricting, which is step 2, upon determination of the total number of members of each house of the state legislature to which each basic island unit is entitled, the commission shall apportion the members among the districts therein and redraw the district lines where necessary, in such manner that for each house, the average number of permanent residents per member in each district is nearly equal to the average for the basic island unit as practicable. So we also talked about the extraction process prior to the apportionment. And I think our slide 37 of the past presentation shows that the permanent resident population base should exclude entirety for the state of 71,665, on Oahu, 70,599, on Hawaii, 539, on Maui, 226, and on Kauai, 301. And with those permanent resident populations, we use the method of equal proportions and determined that Oahu was eligible for 17 Senate seats and 35 House seats. Hawaii was 4 Senate seats and 7 House seats. Maui, 3 Senate seats, 6 House seats. And Kauai, 1 Senate and 3 House seats. Now, we'll get to the method of how we did the extraction. Given the importance of determining the population of non-permanent resident military and their dependents that would be extracted from the U.S. Census, we began this process prior to it and in late 2019. As a starting point, we sent letters to the congressional delegation seeking its assistance in establishing a liaison with the military to provide us data for the reapportionment purposes. We noted that we were looking for the military to capture relevant address information of non-resident military members and their dependents that were associated with the state on the date of the census, April 1st, 2020. This resulted in Indo-PACOM informing U.S. Senator Hirono that Dr. Robert Campbell, Branch Chief, Quality of Life and Education, U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, would be our point of contact. Indo-PACOM essentially worked as a liaison to submit requests to the Defense Manpower Data Center, which is the military source for this type of data. The initial data extract used 5-digit zip codes, and we pointed out that the 9-digit zip code plus 4 was necessary for our purposes. On June 2nd, 2020, we received the update data with the zip code plus 4. On October 9th, 2020, we sent the military a long memorandum indicating a variety of questions we had regarding the data. The main point was that we wanted to make sure the spreadsheets accounted for all of the non-resident military members and their dependents, and that it had accounted for everyone. We noted that the spreadsheet reflected 25,990 military sponsors and 38,438 dependents. To be clear, these were non-permanent residents as opposed to simply all active duty personnel and their dependents. In contrast, in 2011, DMDC had indicated 47,082 non-resident active duty military personnel and 53,115 non-resident dependents for the last reapportionment. Given this reduction, we initially would have expected a corresponding percentage of the reduction in the active duty military presence generally in the state. Instead, we found on DMDC's website that there were 42,803 active duty military members in Hawaii, and that in 2010, there were 42,167 active duty members in Hawaii. On January 25th, 2021, Indo-PAC responded and noted in part the following. The report titled Active Duty Sponsors with Duty State of Hawaii, but State of Legal Residence not Hawaii by residence mailing zip and mailing zip extension dated as April 1st, 2020 should provide the information necessary. It is matched to the VEERS PEAT file to get dependent counts. So task 2, removing non-residents from the appropriate census block that the U.S. Census initially associated with them. The Excel file mentioned that above does reflect the actual number of all non-resident military sponsors and their dependents in Hawaii. I cannot speak to the difference in numbers between 2011 and 2020. However, in July 2015, U.S. Army Pacific announced some force structure changes, resulting in the decrease of soldiers, 2,100 or 1,200 at Schofield Barracks. That were likely other changes as well. In conclusion, the file contains the best information available regarding non-Hawaii resident sponsors and their dependents based on their sponsored dependents residency by zip plus zip 4. Given that we had conveyed our questions and the military stood by its data as the best information available, we proceeded to work with that data and to extract those reflected in it, consistent with our PowerPoint presentations to the Reapportionment Commission. As there recently have been questions regarding the data, similar to the ones we raised, we again reached out to the military by email. We reiterated INDOPAC's early email of January 21st, 2021, and pointed out DBED's data book tables that appeared to reflect that the overall number of active duty members was similar to what had existed in 2010. As of this time, we have not heard a response, but we expect the response will be similar to what we have received in the past. Given that much has been said about the DBED data book, I would point out that a review of table 1.03, resident population by military status, 2010 to 2020 indicates the following caveat. Population estimates for July 1st, 2020 were created without incorporation or consideration of the 2020 census results. Additionally, the table reflects only active duty personnel and their dependents, as opposed to breaking down a distinction between permanent resident and non-permanent residents. As such, one cannot tell if the population of non-permanent military residents has increased or decreased from the DBED table. Simply put, the table was not meant to reflect that. Finally, the table does provide some limited evidence that the number of military dependents is not a consistent percentage of the number of military members. Specifically, in 2010, there were 40,800 active duty military members and 65,063 military dependents. In 2020, according to the same table, the active duty military members were 45,283 and the dependents were 55,311. In other words, the table says the active military increased by a little under 5,000, but the corresponding dependents dropped by nearly 10,000. Simply put, one cannot make assumptions from certain data points about other data points. In the present case, we are interested in non-permanent resident military members and their dependents. DBED's table, and that's table 1.03, resident military population by military status, 2010 to 2020. Finally, we did reach out to Dr. Y.S. Kim, who is the branch chief of the Statistics and Data Support Branch of DBED. He was limited in what he could hypothesize about DMDC's numbers without knowing more about the details on how DMDC calculated its numbers. As for using other information in the data book, he said the following. Regarding other data available from our data book, data on military personnel and their dependents tend to vary by the source of the information because each source applies a different definition in determining who should be counted and who should be excluded. So an apple-to-apple comparison is difficult based on data from different sources. As you can see, a lot of time and thought has been put into this process. In the end, we believe the data we have for the extraction of the non-permanent resident military members and their dependents is the best we can obtain under the circumstances, and that it reflects a reasonable good faith estimate of the population of non-permanent residents. specifically is directly from the military, and the military has vouched and stood for it. That's my presentation. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions for David and discussion by the commissioners about the numbers and where they'd like to use? Scott, maybe you can see everybody. You can call on commissioners if they have questions or.
I have a question.
Commissioner Kennedy has a question.
Yeah, so based on all of the weeks of this discussion, it basically sounds to me like David and his staff, last time we needed to go to the Supreme Court with Solomon, and that was a big hammer, right? So you had the big hammer saying to the military and everybody, look, give us the real numbers, you know, now you're court ordered. So it sounds like this time they've done their due diligence and we're working off the same set of numbers as if we had the Supreme Court demanding that we get those numbers. Am I interpreting that correctly? That this set of numbers, if we went back with a bigger hammer, we're not going to get any different numbers from the military. This is an absolute, this is what the military is saying they have, and that's what we're going to use, or we're going to vote on that's what we would use. Am I interpreting that correctly, David?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Commissioner Chun has a question.
David, just to clarify, when you were explaining the DBED number, what I think I heard was that the number includes all military personnel without a distinction between permanent and non-permanent.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Nishimura has a question.
Very quickly, David, and I think possibly, although the data is somewhat different, all of the information or much of the information that DBED gets is also from the military. Is that correct? So as far as source-wise, it's the same source.
It's the same organizational source, but different departments are responsible for reporting different numbers, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just like to reiterate and clarify that. So pre-Solomon in 2011, 12, this data set, or the data set that ended up being used in that reapportionment 10 years ago, wasn't available. So after the Supreme Court case, we went back to the military, they provided a data set which we ended up using in 10 years ago. That same criteria and data set is what was requested this time and provided now, correct?
That's correct.
So the data set that we've been working off of and looking at is apples to apples in terms of what was provided to us post Solomon 10 years ago and used subsequently, which has stood for the last 10 years.
Well, actually, it's the exact same methodology we used in 2001. And as a fact, we used it in 2010 as option C for the commission. The caveat in that extraction C was the fact that they did not give us as good of location data as they did this time. And then with the Supreme Court's decision, we were able to go back to the military and say, look, we got to do better. You got to give us better. And they did.
So just to be clear, that the criteria and data set hasn't changed. We haven't asked for any different criteria or changed the basis. I mean, what we're working off of is what we worked off of post Solomon 10 years ago.
And 20 years ago.
Thank you.
Yep.
So David, would it be safe to say that the military data post Solomon that's been provided to us is more accurate than the DBED data?
Well, I think, as I tried to say last time, was, DBED has a different, reasons for the numbers that they have, right? And And I don't want to dive into what what I think goes on, but they have a different need as far as reporting numbers. Our need was, we needed to know exactly who here paid taxes in another state and should be excluded from our permanent resident population. So I don't want to speak for DBET, but the Dr. Regarding other data available from our data book, data on military personnel and their dependent tends to vary by the source of information because each source applies a different definition in determining who should be counted and who should be excluded. So an apple-to-apple comparison is difficult on data from different sources, right? So ours comes from the Defense Manpower Data Center. I don't know if you could count them any more accurate than that. I think they pay those guys off that. And the DEERS file. So all of the dependent benefits come from the DEERS file. I mean, that number's got to be just about as exact as it can be.
And that makes sense to me.
Any further discussion on these numbers? Commissioners, I know we were potentially going to do an action on this prior to moving on to the next agenda item, but I think all of the agenda items related to legislative apportionment and redistricting are kind of interrelated. So I'm going to move from agenda item to agenda item and take the motions for action at the end of the apportionment and redistricting discussions, if that's okay. And David, if you can get prepared so that when we're ready to make a motion and potentially vote on these issues, if you can have ready your presentation from the August 26th meeting to bring up the appropriate slides on standards and criteria and the establishment of the non-permanent resident population, or sorry, establishment of the permanent resident population, so that we can see them visually as we vote on them.
That's all being run out of the Office of Elections, but
If David got it.
You got it? All right.
Okay. Scott got it? All right, great. Okay, perfect. So with that, we're going to move on to agenda item 6, discussion and action regarding the use of canoe districts. So I know that came up in testimony this morning about that. And David, maybe you can provide like a quick overview about what that means and what we're going to be discussing.
Yes, be glad to. Article 6, Section 6 of the Hawaii State Constitution provides that no district shall extend beyond the boundaries of any basic island unit. If one complies with this requirement, then one compares the population difference between the largest and the smallest of the districts of each house, and the deviations can be quite large. Given equal protection clauses, litigation regarding the 1981 reapportionment plan resulted in a court-ordered interim plan that used canoe districts. So basically what it was is, because Kauai has a pretty set population and the rest of the basic island units are fairly dynamic, Kauai is always going to be on the short end of the stick when it comes to the Senate. They don't have enough population to make 2, and so they are stuck with 1. I think before statehood days, they actually apportioned half seats, 1 to Kauai and 1 to Oahu. And that's basically what canoe districts are. In 2001 and 2011, commissioners chose to follow the state constitution and not use canoe districts. The matter was litigated in Costa and after the reapportionment, and the court at the time found that we could justify the deviations associated with recognizing the integrity of basic island units. However, there is no guarantee that the courts will likewise find that we can justify the deviations this time around that will occur if we follow the state constitution and recognizing the integrity of the 4 basic island units. So again, when you look at the drawing, we're going to show you Canoe district that actually looks part of Kauai to Oahu, and one that hooks Maui to the Big Island. And those connections would share 1 member in each district, right? So you would have a senator who would be representing, theoretically, Kauai's 2nd senatorial district and a district also on Oahu. And the same thing with Maui and the Big Island. And now if we can roll the tape.
Hi, this is Kim with the Office of Elections. We have the slides available. If David, you want to explain the slides?
Yeah, we'd have to go through and find that because it comes after the population base. So if you could scroll through. I can't scroll through. Need to keep going. All right, this is right. So go back some. So when we talk about deviations, we not only have to have uniform deviations within each basic island unit, we also need to have that same fair representation across the state, all the districts in the state. All right, so go to the next one. Up, yeah. So after we've done our method of equal proportions, we know what number each basic island unit has, right? Then we start looking at the target population for each basic island unit. Okay. So that's Solomon step 2. So we extracted everybody. We know what the population is. We know how many districts there are. We divide the population of each basic island unit by the number of districts that's allowed, and we come up with a number. And that's known as the target population. So, okay, next one. So Kauai's basic island unit permanent population is 72,997. Okay. Okay. All right. So if we're talking about a house, the house, right? They've got 3 districts. They've got a population of 72,997. I'm pretty sure if you divide 72,997 by 3, you'll come up with 24,332. Okay. So that's our target deviation for Kauai. And we use that same formula in each basic island unit, right? So courts have generally looked upon a 10% standard deviation. So that's the difference between the largest deviation in the basic island unit against the lowest deviation in the basic island unit. So if you add those together, -2 and a +5 would be 7. Is that making sense? So it's the plus and the minus for each basic island unit. And that, because Hawaii redistricts within each basic island unit, we can't have a standard target population across the state. Because if we had a chance to go to Honolulu, you would see that Kauai's target for a house is 24,332. And I think for Oahu, it's 26,27. And then Big Island is like 24 and Maui is pretty good at 27. So you see these different variances between each basic island unit has to be rationalized to satisfy the courts. So in 1982, they said by hooking part of Kauai onto Oahu, they could get that target deviation up there. And the same thing was hooking on Maui to Hawaii Island, right? Now, that's if you want to keep a deviation that is 10% statewide. The only way that we can do that is by doing a canoe district, or actually 2 of them in this case, right? So what we did last time in Costic was we took the populations of each basic island unit divided by the total number of legislators in each basic island unit and developed that as our deviation. And I think as we go through this, go ahead. Okay, keep going. Okay. So these are the basic island units and their targets statewide if we do not use canoe districts. right? So on the Senate side, you have 17 seats. So the target population per district is 55,642. Hawaii would be 50,023, Maui 54, and Kauai is 72. So you can see the difference between 72 and 50 is going to create a very large deviation. There's nowhere to recover it unless you use Canoe districts. And it's still kind of the same in the House. Kauai has 24,332, and then Big Island has 28,584. Then when you add those two sets of deviations together, right, you want those to be less than 10, less than 10% deviation. And actually, I think we've got it. I think we're actually, our deviation statewide is less than it was 2011. Go ahead. So again, we kind of like repeat this stuff so that we try to make sure that everybody understands what's going on. Okay.
Hey, David, this is Mark Mugishi. So I just want to make sure that myself and everybody else is clear that what you're saying in this presentation is that if we didn't use Canoe districts, which would split people in half or whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, we would likely fall under the 10% deviation threshold.
Statewide, yes. But that's by counting the total basic island unit populations added together, divided by the total number of legislators. So you wouldn't look at it as a house, right? Don't know, do we have a slide that, can you scroll down and see if we have? So this is where we discuss what the court told us in Caustic. In sum, Hawaii's choice of basic island unit autonomy, no Canoe districts, is grounded in the Hawaii Constitution. Hawaii's unique geography, cultural history, running back to before Hawaii was a kingdom, governmental organizations with centralized statewide services in many areas of traditionally municipal level control, and 2-decade failed experiment with Canoe districts has proven antithetical to the basic aim set forth in Reynolds of achieving fair and effective representation for all Hawaii citizens. So even though we're doing this unusual way of looking at it, the court is still allowing us deference because we were able to justify why we have chosen to do it this way. Next one. Only after evaluation of an apportionment plan in its totality can a court determine whether there has been sufficient compliance with the requisites of the Equal Protection Clause. This choice is not only rational, they're talking about our decision. The choice is not only rational, and it is substantial and has considerable force. And where an apportionment plan is justified by a long-standing and legitimate policy of preserving county boundaries, and absent any taint of discrimination, substantial deference is to be accorded to the political decisions of the people of Hawaii. Next. So this is where we have our total average over here in the last column where it shows the 0.55%. So the average target, right, for the 76 legislators would be 18,205. On Oahu, we get to 18,191. On Hawaii County, we have 18,190. Maui, 18,290. And Kauai, 18,249. So this would be the deviations without canoe districts, right? If we just went straight no canoe districts, right? And what the numbers tell us is this: only when we use this formula of apportioning among every legislator in Hawaii can we come up and balance these to less than 10%. Next slide.
Can I ask a question, Mark? Is it okay
Yes.
for me to ask David a question? So this presentation is basically proposing that we don't accept canoe districts for the 2021. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we are clear. Okay, thank you.
Okay. So I'm trying to remember, it's been a while since I've looked at these, but next slide. So here's what it looked like when we proposed it in 2001. You can see where we have the northeast coast of Kauai hooked on with the north shore of Oahu, and the Hana side of Maui hooked up with, I think, Puna. Next. In 2001, we initially started out using the canoe districts to get the deviation down to less than 10%. And when we went to public hearings, everywhere we went, people said no. A little bit stronger than no, but no. Next. And the same with when we suggested multi-member districts, nobody liked that either. Okay, next. And I think this is just more discussion on deviation. I keep going. I think we're almost done here. And so this is what the tech committee is going to try and do, is get these deviations down as small as they can. Districts as equals in population as possible, taking into account the geographic conditions that we have on the various basic island units. And keep going. So right now, the U.S. House was at 0.6. Oahu is over 30.72. Hawaii County over 15. Maui over 14. In the House, Oahu's 56 over deviation. Hawaii 16%, Maui 15%, and Kauai 4%. Okay. Okay. So this just kind of just shows you how we do the integrity checks, which will actually make sure that our maximum deviation within each basic island unit and statewide is maintained. Okay, next. As far as criteria and standards, you know, we talked about this.
Yeah, hey, David, I'm going to
Yes.
interrupt you for a second. The criterion standards, we're going to take up in a different agenda item. So
All right.
for now, I'm just going to ask the commissioners if they have any questions about the use of canoe districts, given that generally speaking, people don't want them. And it appears that we can stay within a reasonable deviation even if we don't use them. Any further questions about that? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the standards and criteria governing the redistricting process. And I interrupted David just as he was going to start talking about those things. They were presented at the August 26th meeting. They're the things such as, it has to look compact and it can't look like a weird shaped thing that has just connected by a little point and all those types of other things. But maybe David, you can just quickly put it up and review it in a couple of minutes so we can all be reminded about that. It's also in the meeting packet, all of the different standards and criteria that are listed in the meeting packet of how we will do the reapportionment and the redistricting.
Well,
so Scott, maybe you can ask your team to put that slide back up again on the.
So basically, because we're making the plans available to the public to use, we have to make sure that both teams are playing the same rules. So we talk about what they have to use the population base we provide them. They have to use the deviations like we're using them. They can't have canoe districts. They can't do multi-member districts. The compactness, the following the geography, not crossing mountain ranges with districts, confining as much as we can 2 House seats inside of a Senate seat. No district should cross the congressional district lines, so you can't have part of it in 1 and part of it in 2. And that's what we require if we want to allow the public to participate. We have to give them some rules to play by. And we went through this again before. Next. And there's 2 sets, one for the congressional district, because we have to use the federal population for doing the congressional districts. And the second one would be the permanent resident population base for the state districts. Okay. This again talks about the canoe districts. So we're telling those folks, don't try that. And if you're going to submit a plan, you have to provide tables that reflect the deviations. Next. And this is basically the things that we talked about in our presentation before. Next. Yeah. And what we make some suggestions down at the bottom, like, you know, we've made available a blank slate for somebody who really wants to get into this, so they can start with a complete blank slate and create their districts that way. We suggest that if you put the existing districts up, you save yourself quite a bit of time. And that's the same with the tech committee. They'll get to make up their mind whether they want to go with a blank slate or use existing district lines.
Great, thank you, David. So commissioners, is there any question, or are there any questions for David on the standards and criteria, including the issue about Canoe districts and not using them as part of the standards and criteria? I see Commissioner Chan raising his hand.
So, Mr. Chair, just to confirm for the record, David, the standards and criteria document simply codifies for the public the standards that the commission would be using, so that efforts in that regard by the public would be working within consistent guidelines. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Any further questions or comments?
David, if all of the criteria proposed are not met, would a person be able to submit a plan for consideration?
Well, I think they would propose the plan, and then we would probably bounce it back to them and say you're deficient in a particular area. We have had in the past where some folks have, rather than try and do a whole plan, they have a specific district that they, you know, think could be better. And so we share all of those plans that get submitted to us with the technical committee. We keep them in a little binder, and each time we have a meeting, we show them the ones that have been submitted since the last time we've met. And they can take whatever suggestions. I think we took a few of them last time. Dylan would remember that more than I. But we encourage it. We try to be as helpful as we can with the folks who are working on plans. And we do share the plans with the tech committee so that they can determine whether the ideas are good or not.
Anything further? Okay, otherwise, commission members, the staff has presented proposed standards and criteria, which will guide congressional and legislative reapportionment and redistricting at the and they presented it at the commission's August 26, 2021 meeting. Is there a motion to adopt the standards and criteria as presented by the staff at the August 26, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Second. Oops, sorry.
So I have a motion by Commissioner Rathbun, seconded by Commissioner Ono.
That's fine.
Any further discussion? Can you take the vote, Mr. Secretary?
Commissioner Chip Chase.
Aye.
Commissioner Chun.
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota. Commissioner Nakota. Oh, you're muted.
Aye. Did that work?
Commissioner, yes. Commissioner Nishimura.
Aye.
Commissioner Nanaka.
Aye.
Commissioner Ono.
Aye.
Commissioner Rathbun.
Aye.
Chair Mugishi.
Aye.
Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you. And, you know, before we vote on the next motion on the permanent resident-based apportionment, let's ask your staff, Scott, if they can put up the slide from the last presentation, just so the commissioners can see it again. What we're talking about, the permanent resident base minus the military extraction, minus the university student extraction, if you have that.
Okay, it's way back at the. Do you want to look at the extraction or the results of the extraction? It's back by about 37, I think. Yeah, so I think if you go kind of go down, I think we talk about who gets extracted next. 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 All right. So this is extracted amount for each basic island unit and total. I think this is just military. Next. Yeah. This is the total per each basic island unit. And then
Commissioners, any questions on these numbers? This is just kind of to sum it up, these are the numbers that we agreed we would, when we were talking earlier in our discussion, that we were going to minus out the numbers provided to us by PACOM, the military numbers that were specifically asked, who are the Hawaii, non-permanent Hawaii resident military members, and the numbers provided to us by all the universities. Similarly, the non-permanent university students going to school in Hawaii.
Then I think there's a total count of what after the extraction a little bit further down.
Okay, so we try page 70.
So yeah, that's this is the extraction amount from each basic island unit and the remaining population in that unit that would be known as the permanent resident population base.
Any questions from the commissioners on this?
Should we make a motion before we have a discussion on this?
Sure. So basically at the commission's August 26, 2021 meeting, this was the presentation by the staff for a proposed permanent resident population base and the corresponding apportionment of state senate and house seats among the base island units. So I think the motion we will be making is there a motion to adopt the permanent resident population base and corresponding apportionment of state legislative seats among the basic island units as presented by the staff at the August 26, 2021 meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion on this?
Yeah, I'll just start with some background and reasoning on this. For me personally, my position hasn't changed in 10 years. Philosophically, I'm opposed to removing anybody from the census count. I think if we are interested in fair apportionment of and representation of the population, and equal districts that is most accurately represented by the people who are counted here, regardless of what their taxpayer status is or their military status or whatever. If they're counted here and they live here, they have an impact on our community and our districts, and the resources that the state and the county need to put out in order to support that population. So for me, I mean, I consistently think this is an unnecessary step. But that being said, there is some Supreme Court decision and law that we have to follow. And so then that brings us to, if we're going to do it, we got to do it in the best way possible that makes the most sense, that we can feel confident that it's legal and stands up to the requirements that were laid out in Solomon and the state constitution. And so I just want to reiterate that, the discussion that we had earlier, that this is a population base, or this extraction proposal and data is exactly the same criteria that we used in the second iteration of our reapportionment plan 10 years ago. And so nothing has changed. The criteria hasn't changed. The same information that was requested from the military after Solomon to give us a better data set was requested this time, and this is what we got. We can agree with it, criticize it, whatever we want, but at this, it's as exact as we're going to get. And I think from the discussion earlier, it's pretty clear that this is an inexact process on many different levels, and we can pick it apart all we want, but we have a legal precedent that this data set was acceptable 10 years ago. And I think it's a safe assumption to assume going forward that it will be, if we use this and establish our population base. We got to get to work. We don't have a lot of time. So I'd like to vote on this and approve it, and then we can move forward and get to work on drawing district lines. I think if we use any other data set or inject additional information in, we're going to further open ourselves to legal challenge. And it just doesn't make sense. We know that this data set is something that was used 10 years ago and stood up to legal challenge even after Solomon, and we should use it again. So I'll be supporting this plan. Thank you, Chair.
That's your vote. You made the motion.
What's that?
No, I said you made the motion, I seconded. So typically the discussion is if somebody is in disagreement, right? So.
Oh, no, I'd happily vote against my own motion. No problem.
I actually agree with you, Dylan. I have your same, I actually agree with you on all of the above.
So that's a third. So we're still in the motion.
Okay. Now we vote.
Any other discussion from anyone? Okay, Mr. Secretary. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Commissioner Nishimura.
I just wanted to reiterate to the public, there's a lot of ways you can look at the information that has been presented, and staff and the department has done the best they can with the information presented. They have been consistent in how they apply that information. And sometimes, we don't, as both Dylan and Commissioner Nikota suggested, that they're not exactly happy with all of it, but we live with what we have to live with. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Chan.
Yeah, just to make sure that a couple of points raised in discussion earlier, in public testimony earlier, don't go unaddressed in the record. I'd just like to say that with regard to the numbers that were presented by the military pertaining to non-permanent resident military, I think it should be clear on the record that David Rosenbrock indicated that as juxtaposed against the DBED numbers, this number is a reflection of the non-permanent military. The DBED number is all military. So there's that distinction that I just want to make sure is clear. Also, in the context of Act 14, I just wanted to speak to that and make sure that as part of the record, we expressed our understanding that rational, sensible, practicable interpretation of the statute refers to the phrase within Act 14 pertaining to the US Census count as referring to the total population of the state and not to the non-permanent residents. I think that the interpretation that was shared with us by the Attorney General is sensible and avoids sort of a scenario where we couldn't do the work we've been charged with. So again, just for the record, and I will be supporting Mr. Nonaka's motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further comments, questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to echo some of what Commissioner Chun just said, that the constitutional mandate is that permanent residents be counted. And I think Solomon, as well as Act 14, helped to define that further. And I think Act 14 works in concert with the Constitution rather than, in opposition to Solomon. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you, Commissioner Ono.
Chair, this
Anything-
is Commissioner Chip Chase.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that having been on the last reapportionment commission, I believe that the process we're following is consistent with the final plan that was adopted and upheld and uses the best information available. Having looked at the alternatives, I'm satisfied that the information that we are proposing to use that is proposed in this motion is the most accurate information available, and I will also be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Hello, Commissioner Chip Chase. Anything else? If not, I'll just say, from my own perspective, I want to thank all the commissioners for the lively discussion, the due diligence. I do agree. We'll be voting soon, so everyone will hear how I vote. But I do agree that we are picking the best solution that is true to the Constitution, true to the Solomon ruling, and true to Act 14. And I think that's our job, and I'm proud of the commission for taking the time. It's been a long conversation, but it's worth it. So we've got to make sure we do it right, and that it can withstand all legal challenges. And so with that, Mr. Secretary, if you can take the vote.
Commissioner Chip Chase,
Aye.
Commissioner Chun, Commissioner Kennedy,
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota,
Aye.
Commissioner Nishimura,
Aye.
Commissioner Nonaka,
Aye.
Commissioner Ono,
Aye.
Commissioner Rathbun,
Aye.
Chair Mugiishi.
Aye.
Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you. We'll now move on to agenda item number 8, which is a discussion and action regarding the use of the commission's interaction with advisory councils. So at our last meeting, as you all recall, we discussed how this commission would like to work with the advisory councils. So one proposal, which was proposed by staff, was to form a public information permitted interaction group to work with the advisory councils. In the last reapportionment cycle, we learned that there was actually a standing agenda item where the advisory councils could provide a report to the commission. So another proposal besides forming another permitted interaction group would be for us to ask a specific commissioner from his or her home island to be the liaison to the advisory council from that island and assist them in preparing the report that would be on a standing agenda item at these commission meetings. So with those kind of two alternate concepts in play, is there any discussion from the commission members?
Yeah, I have a question. So are you saying that the liaison to the advisory commission or committee would be the person presenting that committee's information?
I mean,
So
it could be, but it doesn't have to be. I think the advisory council might want to present their own information. I think the liaison would help them prepare, allow them to, come to the commission meeting with whatever relevant issues they may have.
How's that not redundant? I'm sorry. How's that not redundant?
Well, I'm just trying to not be prescriptive, right? I think each advisory council could be allowed to present at their standing agenda, at the standing agenda item, however they would like to, whether they would ask their liaison to present or whether the committee members themselves would present. And Commissioner Chan had his hand up, so.
Yeah, I think to clarify Ms. Kennedy's question and comment, I think what we had, what I had thought when the discussion occurred as far as a liaison and providing an agenda item for the advisory councils to be able to present their thoughts and suggestions at our regular commission meetings was that would be an important vehicle by which to give deference and recognize local knowledge and insights as far as specific boundary issues or mapping concerns or what have you, and provide them with sort of a direct voice into the process. And so while of course a commission member who was acting to assist, facilitate the work of the advisory councils could, if they asked, provide that report or their thoughts. My thinking is that we should defer to them and allow that direct access and input, absent our filter, so to speak.
Yeah, that's why I'm just confused as to why we need a filter, why they need a filter or any direction. I feel like the point of the committees is so that, they obviously will either have some opposition or they may have some suggestions or opinions that would differ from the commission, right? So this is their opportunity to do that. Having a filter or someone that is influencing them in any way, outside of presenting facts. I'm just trying to wrap my head around it.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not trying to characterize it as a filter. I mean, the liaison lives on their island, right? And they're arguably will know these people, and it's just a connection to the commission.
Okay, so Chair, in the past, did the staff do that? That would probably be a question for David, because that was one of the options, right?
Right, and I think the staff did do it, but I'll let David speak, but I think that's why they recommended that they not do it again.
Oh, okay. Right, I get that. I totally understand that.
And I'll just add my thought process in thinking this was, a good idea was for those of us on the neighbor islands, these commission meetings can be a little bit restrictive in terms of the time you have to present and the format and stuff. And if we want to have a little bit longer, informal discussion with the advisory committee members on their thoughts about their specific island and the lines and districts, that this is just a vehicle to do that, where they'll have a point of contact and we can make sure that we have a clear understanding of their thoughts and feelings about certain actions that we can relay and represent at the commission meetings.
And just to add to that, in 2001, the Public Information Committee worked with the advisory councils to set up little meetings on each part of the islands so that they could invite us over to show what we were doing. They would run the meeting, but most of that coordination was done through a commission member. Now in 2011, the commission members delegated to staff and we did that part of it, but up to you.
And then it's my understanding that these committees have already been formed, correct? They were appointed like we were.
Rules Committee and the Tech Committee.
No, but I thought that the advisory committees have already been formed as well.
Yes, they have. I think the thing that I would be, obviously, I think somebody from the tech committee would have to be the one that would advise me on that, be the liaison, only because they'd have the most current information. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking like that, but I would think that would be it. And because we're limited by sunshine laws and the fact that you can't have a majority at a tech committee, would have to be somebody. I mean, we'd have to either give somebody else the information and they would have to portray it. And it just seems like you're muddying the water by doing that.
So you're saying that the advisory committees are going to be asking for information from the tech committee that maybe our commission doesn't even have?
No.
Or we don't have access to, I mean.
You would have it too, but I think they'd probably work closer with the tech committee than they would with the entire commission.
Chair.
Yes.
Just as an example of the liaison is on Kauai, the advisory committee did reach out to me. They had been in touch with the Office of Elections at the county, and they were instructed to get in touch with the Office of Elections at the state level. And I think one of the things is just some of the information that gets transmitted from the state level to the counties is might be helpful if you had a liaison. Just my thoughts. But we would not, be the ones that telling them, hey, you got to do it a certain way. And I think last time, I don't know if it occurred on Maui or the Big Island, but Kauai did submit a sample or our thoughts on how the district might be done. So that's, just kind of some background on it.
No, thanks. I think that's really valuable perspective, Commissioner Nishimura. That's why I was kind of suggesting when I made the initial proposal that it be tied to the commissioner who lives on that island, because you have that perspective, you have that relationship already, and then it would just make sense for you to be the person who was connected to that advisory council.
That does make sense.
So do we need some kind of action on this?
That's what I was.
Well, I think we actually only need an action if we're going to form a permitted interaction group. If we're not, if everybody is saying we shouldn't, then I think just administratively, we would just tell commissioners from their respective islands to please work with the advisory council and bring them. We just have to decide who that person would be on Oahu, because on Oahu, we have several commissioners. On the other islands, we just have one, right? So it's kind of you're voluntold, you win by default.
So do you all agree that it has to be a technical? Because a technical commissioner? Because I was fighting against that last time only because, again, those of us on the rules committee are now sitting here with not a lot to do, and the technical commissioners are going to be busy and fighting their own battles, right? So then having them be a liaison, or I guess we're just talking about Oahu, whoever we choose to do Oahu, is going to be working on all of this, the districting. But maybe it's mute. If you guys, is there an opportunity?
No,
for
it
those
shouldn't.
of us on the
It shouldn't be.
rules
It shouldn't be required because Grant and Randy are not on the tech committee, and it makes sense for them to be the liaison. So I think it shouldn't be a requirement.
I agree with Dylan, and he's on the tech committee, and so if there is a need for technical committee input, he can provide it. And in addition, there's going to be opportunities for the advisory committees to meet with the council as a whole or the commission as a whole at meetings. And so I agree that it's not a prerequisite.
Actually, I did volunteer the last time, and that still stands. I will volunteer to do that.
I did too, but I think Kevin wants to also. I don't know. I'm just worried I'm not going to have a lot to do, and I'm a doer. I can't imagine if there's an opportunity to help the technical committee or to participate, then I'll withdraw. But frankly, we kind of got separated on this whole rules committee, but there really wasn't any big deal with the rules part. I mean, we're done already.
No, if Kevin, if you want to do it, I'll adhere to you. Otherwise, my offer still stands. I'd be more than willing to do that.
I'm fine but if, you know, if Robin has the time and she wants to be involved, that we can, it's not technical in nature. She's just more of a interface with, if they're going through Office of Elections, it may lessen our having to get involved, Charlotte.
I still stand on that. I don't mind doing it. I do know some of the people on that committee and worked well with them in the past, and I don't have a problem doing that.
So now that we have three people or two that are willing to step up, what do we do? Vote?
Now we vote. I guess somebody's got to nominate us first.
Okay, so I guess we have just to be clear, the neighbor island liaisons are decided, right? So
Right.
For Oahu, Commissioner Rathbone, am I assuming that that you declined to be nominated? I just want to.
I don't see the need for 3 candidates
Okay.
make it easier.
So with that, I've heard 2 people volunteer. So Secretary, if you could go around and just take a vote for, people can vote for Commissioner Kennedy or Commissioner Nakota.
I'm gonna take the vote separate. So first we're gonna do Commissioner Kennedy. I will call every commissioner and then I'll do Commissioner Nakota.
So, well, just make it clear if you're going to do it that way, that you should only vote aye for the one you want, right? So that people don't vote aye on both of them.
Yes, so.
That might be obvious, but I just wanted to say it.
So the vote is for Commissioner Kennedy. Commissioner Chip Chase.
Aye.
Commissioner Chun.
Nay.
Commissioner Kennedy.
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota.
Nay.
Commissioner Nishimura.
Nay.
Commissioner Nowak.
Aye.
Commissioner Ono.
Nay.
Commissioner Rathbun.
Kev.
Commissioner Rathbun.
Aye.
Chair Muguishi.
What is the count here?
4-4.
4-4?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I'm the deciding vote then, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say my reason for, I think Commissioner Nakota would do a great job, but the reason why I'm going to cast my vote for Commissioner Kennedy is because she is enthusiastically wanting to contribute to something and is not part of the technical committee. And I think her enthusiasm for being a liaison would be useful. So, again, Commissioner Nakota, definitely not personal. I think you would be amazing there. I just know you're going to be tied up in 3 times a week meetings in the technical committee. And I'm being a little paternalistic here and saying, concentrate on your well-being there. So.
Yep, totally understand. Not a problem.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we have no more motions there. We have our 4 liaisons.
So Chair, to clarify, the motion was made and seconded by who?
There wasn't a motion.
I don't think there was a motion. You're right.
There's no real motion. We were just voting because I don't think this actually needs an action. I probably could appoint him myself, but I just thought that was a fair way just to make sure that because we're not changing the structure of anything. We're just asking individual commissioners to be liaisons with the advisory council. And we were just trying to decide who it would be from Oahu. So we kind of decided it would be Robin.
Okay.
Yay.
Okay.
I promise to ask you for help, Charlotte.
Yep. Oh, good. You're gonna have to.
I promise.
I'm not.
All right, we're going now to agenda item number 9. which is a presentation of the proposed congressional reapportionment plans by the technical committee, permitted interaction group. So at our May 17th, 2021 meeting, the technical committee, a permitted interaction group was formed, and that technical committee will be presenting its findings and recommendation today regarding the congressional reapportionment plans that it developed. So please keep in mind that since they're presenting it today, no action can be taken today. Specifically, HRS section 92-2.5 requires that any deliberation and decision-making may only occur at a meeting subsequent to the one in which the findings and recommendations of the permitted interaction group are made. So I'm now going to turn the meeting over to the technical committee for their presentation.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. Just want to make sure on the Canoe districts, were we going to take action on that?
Well, the Canoe districts were part of the criteria and standards. And in there, it was that they would not have Canoe districts.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
With regard to agenda item number 9, on behalf of the technical committee permitted interaction group, I'd like to, we came up with 2 proposed congressional reapportionment plans, and I'd like to call on Royce Jones, our staff person, to present the 2 plans.
Thank you, Commissioner Ono.
Yes, thank you. And so, as we've done before, we recorded this as a video in case there was any internet issues. So I think if someone there, the Office of Elections, can queue up that video. And then I'll stand by. David and I will be here, and of course, the members of the technical group, if there are any questions. Aloha, commissioners. Today we have a short presentation of the work the Technical Permitted Interaction Group has been doing, working on congressional redistricting plans. They actually have 2 plans that they'd like to present for your consideration, and that's what we'll describe in this presentation. So just a quick review. We did get the census block information, which is what we need because it is the commission's responsibility to draw those districts, to do the redistricting of the congressional, the U.S. House of Representatives, the 2 seats for Hawaii. And as we shared before in an earlier presentation, we received the data for every census block on August 12th. For the state, we have the federal resident population base. You see the total there for the state. Now that we have that, we can begin redistricting. Here's an update on our checklist. Last time we talked, we had processed the data and we had sent it to Esri to load into the Redistricting online application. They have done that now, and it is available for both the commission and the public to begin redistricting. And this is actually the Hawaii Redistricting online application was used by the technical group to come up with the plans I'm about to share with you. It is available online. Again, the same tools, the same data for members of the advisory councils, members of the public, anyone interested in using the application to draw their own plans. The link is on the reapportionment website, and there is a 25-minute video tutorial on how to sign up for an account and then how to do assignment of districts to create redistricting plans. So that is online if you're interested, and this is the same application used by the technical group and the same guidelines, right? We've talked about these in earlier presentations. As the technical group was working through these congressional plans, they were keeping in mind the guidelines on total deviation for federal, that's less than 1%. Compactness, contiguous, no submergence. Again, we presented these earlier. I'm not going to spend time going through them now, but they are important guidelines. So with that, as you open the Hawaii Redistricting Online, you're presented with some templates. For the congressional, there's a blank template and there's a current template. it's most folks prefer starting with the current. You can start with totally blank, no census blocks assigned to any district, but by and large, we found people prefer to start with the current districts and then make adjustments to get better representation, lower deviations. And indeed, that's what the technical group has done. That's what we're going to show you. So let's start with the current. We started with the current plan, and these are the boundaries. So 2 districts. CD1 is, as you can see in the enlargement there, all on Oahu, the south coast of Oahu and extending up into central Oahu. The rest of Oahu, and then all the rest of actually the other islands, including the Northwest Hawaiian Islands, are all part of Congressional District 2. We often abbreviate that CD2, CD1, and CD2. So that's on the online application. It shows us that in the map window, but it also shows us a district window. And in that district window, we can see the target, because that's the total population divided by 2 with ideal equal representation. Each one of these districts would have exactly the same population, 727,636. Total population divided by 2 and rounded. Now that we have the census block numbers, we can actually look and see then what is the actual population using these current boundaries. What is the population within each of these districts as of April 1st, 2020, the federal population base that we use for redistricting. So you can see the numbers there, but again, the application in the district window will do the math for you if you're trying to see what's the difference between the target and the total. In the district window, it shows, so we can see CD1, Congressional District 1, is 2,000 above that ideal. And then likewise, Congressional 2 is 2,000 below that ideal. The application will also do the math for you, because we need to actually look at that as a percent between the highest and the lowest. And that's the number. The total deviation then is the difference between the highest and the lowest, or 0.3% and minus 0.3%, for a total overall deviation using the current boundaries of 0.6%. Now, what's interesting about that, as we mentioned earlier, courts have upheld 4 federal plans total deviations of less than 1%. So with our current boundaries and the population, federal population base of April 1st, 2020, without changing anything, it's actually below that 1% threshold. It's at 0.6%. So this is the first proposed congressional plan for the commission's consideration, is the existing. Keep the existing districts, make no changes. It's lower than the 1% total deviation, with a deviation of 0.6%. So that's how the technical group started looking at this. But they're wondering, can we get that deviation even lower, right? Is it possible to try and get a lower deviation, meaning more equal representation? How could we do that? So the technical group spent quite a bit of time looking at different areas and looking at the map. You can see a lot of the boundary follows the ko'olaus. There's not really much you can do there. In the end, the technical group ended up looking down out on the west side, actually looking at this area in here. So I'm gonna expand that so you can see it a little bit better. It's this area, the area around Ko'olina, Honokaihale, and Barber's Point. And again, the tools with the Hawaii Redistricting Online allow you to take blocks and assign them. So we're seeing here that the Congressional District 1, some of that population needs to be assigned to Congressional District 2. And so that's what the technical group started looking at, was how to do that. And so that's what I want to show you here. Starting from the existing, how could they lower it by assigning blocks in this area? So they tried a lot of different things. In the end, they came up with this. In this plan, you can see now the area that has been added to Congressional District 2. And it encompasses that area around Barber's Point, Ko'olina. And the deviation is down to 0.34%. So from 0.6 to 0.34. So that is an improvement in the deviation. And it does follow the guidelines. This district boundary, let me enlarge it for you a little bit. If we look at just this area right in here, you can see the former line is in red. It followed H1 and Barrington Highway. That's the current line. Under this proposal, that line would instead shift down briefly on Kalaeloa Boulevard and then cut over to a drainage canal that runs down to the ocean. So it's a very clean boundary. It does not split communities. It follows the guidelines and it's improved the percentages. So this is the second proposed plan from the technical group, an alternate plan to keeping things as they are. Here's an enlargement even further. You can see the areas, Go'olina, Honokaihale, and then to the south, Barbers Point, Campbell Industrial Park. So looking at the two, these are the two proposed congressional plans, existing and alternate. Both are below the deviation of 1% that's been upheld by courts for federal plans. Again, the existing one, 0.6, and the alternate 0.34. So the technical group thought both of these plans seemed reasonable. They'd like to put them forth for the commission decision-making, and also to hear from the advisory councils and to hear from the public to get their input on these two proposed plans. And with that, we'll stop and see if there are any questions from the commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you, Royce. Any questions for the technical committee?
Yeah, I have a question. So they're putting forth two, so they didn't vote internally on which one they'd prefer?
I think that's up for the entire commission to vote on.
So we can't vote today, though. We need to vote at the next meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so.
It's for, this way we can discuss today, we can take public testimony, and then act at the next time we get together.
I'd just like to say we didn't put forth just one because they both met the criteria, and we felt that they both should be brought forward since there was a change.
And then I guess I would add in here that I think as the commissioners just said from the technical group, they both seem like equally good. And that's where we want to hear then feedback from other commissioners, from the advisory councils, from the public. And one thing I will do tonight, I'm going to have a busy night here, but I will take both of these plans and make them available on the redistricting online application so that anyone wants to come and zoom in and look at details, they'll be able to do that. Any other questions on it?
Thank you, Royce. Mr. Chair, I would ask that all of the advisory committees chime in on what is their preference at the next meeting.
Yes, I think that's great. I think that's what their role will be, right? The advisory councils. So we'll ask the liaisons to reach out maybe to their councils and ask for opinions. Any other questions or comments on the, thank you, technical committee. I don't think people realize, like everybody, like how much work you folks do. It's like a tremendous amount of work and the number of hours, and really appreciate it. It's about to get worse too, so.
This was the easy part.
Yeah.
No, you told us this was the hard one.
Just setting the expectations low or high.
Okay, before we consider adjourning the meeting, I just was thinking about Commissioner Nishimura's question. about Canoe districts. And I think it's an important enough issue where we do not want to leave it to any question in anybody's mind that we were voting with the standards and criteria motion to not use Canoe districts. But I think we can clarify that simply by making a separate motion saying that the commission elects or is voting not to use Canoe districts in their reapportionment and redistricting. So if the other commissioners feel like that's a good clarification, would entertain a motion for such.
So moved.
Okay.
I got the motion by Commissioner Rathbun. The second was by Commissioner
Chun.
Chun.
Okay, Scott, if you can take the vote.
Commissioner Chip Chase,
I think he got kicked out. I was trying to get back in.
He's trying to get back in, yeah.
I see him in there.
Yeah, I just let him back in. He should be back. Maybe his audio's not connected yet.
Okay, I'll circle back around. Commissioner Chun,
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota,
Aye.
Commissioner Nishimura,
Aye.
Commissioner Nanaka,
Aye.
Commissioner Ono,
Aye.
Commissioner Rathbun. Commissioner Rathbun, you are on mute.
Aye.
Chair Mugiishi,
Aye.
Commissioner Chip Chase, looks like he's frozen. Commissioner Chip Chase,
I see him moving.
yeah. The motion is to not have Canoe districts made by Commissioner Rathbun, seconded by Commissioner Chun, Commissioner Chip Chase.
Aye.
There you go.
Chair, the motion passes.
Thank you. So are there any other points of business or interest before I call for adjournment? Thank you, everybody, for staying over. We're half an hour over, which could have been worse, but you know, that's good. We got a lot done. And I think it was really important to take the extra time to clarify in our own minds what we're doing and to give the public trust that we're really taking our constitutional and statutory responsibility seriously. So thank you for participating in today's meeting, and is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
To adjourn.
I got a motion by Commissioner Nanaka, seconded by Commissioner Ono.
Any further discussion? Hey, Scott, I think you can take the final vote here.
Commissioner Chip Chase,
Aye.
Commissioner Chun,
Aye.
Commissioner Kennedy,
Aye.
Commissioner Nakota,
Aye.
Commissioner Nishimura,
Aye.
Commissioner Nanaka,
Aye.
Commissioner Ono,
Aye.
Commissioner Rathbun,
Aye.
Chair Mugiishi.
Aye, and mahalo, everyone. See you next time.
Now I get to see how badly the Cowboys got beat up. Go see.